morning, Boomer. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, G. Sorry I was a little bit late. It's Spike's fault. It's his error.
What was he doing?
I don't know. We were in there yakking at each other, and I'm just
About
talking
what?
about
What was he talking
sports. We talk about sports.
What type of sports now?
It was all kinds of sports. We're all over the place. The fact that Vegas won 7-2 over Florida last night.
Yeah.
And guys are throwing their bodies all over the place, ripping into each other.
Yeah.
And, Devontae Adams was interviewed during the game. Jackie Redmond did the interview with him. You could barely hear him. I felt like I was back at halftime in Kansas City with, that song behind me. Oh, God. But anyway, he
Walker
loved
Hayes.
Yeah. He loved, Devontae Adams loved the game and said all the things that, I've been saying for years about the game of hockey.
Nobody
about
cares
the way
about hockey.
Shut up! And how it's played, and especially when it's played in the playoffs, even though a team loses 7-2 last night. And he was like, man, these guys go at it, they hit, they forget about it, they go hit again, and it's 100 miles an hour. And it is something to watch another athlete appreciate what he's seeing. I don't know how many games he goes to, but it seems like he's a real fan. So good for hockey and good for Devontae Adams. Now, football starts very shortly.
Yes.
And I know you're excited about it.
Yeah. Did you hear anything I said?
I did.
Okay. And you have no reaction to that?
Yeah, listen, I'm not sweating about the Mets.
We're
in June.
So
and,
you want to talk about the Golden Knights and the Panthers and how football season starts in 3 months.
I want to see 2 out of 3
Yeah.
by the Mets. I'm not, panicking. We told you yesterday that they were going to DFA Nito. They did that. They have made a decision to keep Vogel back. If he goes through another week of horrendous DHing, they're going to have to make a decision. They're going to have to do something. They have to be scouring every single freaking team out there that, that sucks, like Kansas City, like Oakland.
Well,
to see I don't even know who Oakland has on their team.
Yeah.
Any team that sucks, that they can see if they can extract some sort of left-hand hitting power guy, because we don't have one.
No, not at all. And Billy Epler failed in a big way at the trade deadline last year. He cannot do that again this year. He's going to have to upgrade in multiple places. But let's just hope that they are in a great position at the trade deadline like they were last year. And I almost think that the complacency of how good the team was at the trade deadline last year made them just make some minor tweaks as opposed to really going all in. Really, look how good we are. And I remember at the time talking about how the Mets were, Billy Epler and Steve Cohen really didn't go out there and get big names at the trade deadline, really showing how they believed in this team. Well, you saw how that worked out with them in the offensively in the playoffs and in these key moments down the stretch where guys like Darren Ruff and Daniel Vogelback in the first year you got a full-time DH in the National League are just failing in every single at-bat. So, yeah, but in the moment here, forget about the trade deadline for a second. In the moment here, I mean, we talked about the jumping off point, the catalyst spot, all of those things. And there's going to be a couple of those throughout the season, but no more so than right now in this moment against the Atlanta Braves, because you could come out of this series feeling like you've got no shot in winning the division.
Well, you got 3 your top end pitchers pitching.
Right, exactly. But this is what we said last year when everything lined up. And it was DeGrom and it was Scherzer and it was Bassett who was pitching well at that point. And you couldn't have lined up any better. And Buck Showalter lined it up perfectly for that series. And they ended up getting swept. And, oh, by the way, there's a lot of criticism with the Mets and what they've done in spending money. We're talking about Lindor and other things. Jacob DeGrom goes on the 60-day IL yesterday.
They got that one right.
They did. So far,
at least in the short term, they did.
I mean, so far, we all know that. I mean, you look at this time last year with Jared Kelenic and Edwin Diaz, and Jared Kelenic's playing well this year, and Edwin Diaz is on the IL. And we might not see him for the entire season, so things do change from year to year. But the fact that Jacob DeGrom signed that massive deal, the Mets ended up passing on him. He goes to the Rangers, and he's on the 60-day IL, and it's June. Is just it really is par for the course for him. I mean, I don't want to be rooting against him, but I'm sorry. I mean, it kind of feels like validation in a way.
Well, I think what the Mets did is they said, you know what we'd rather take a short-term approach with older pitchers than a 5-year approach with an older pitcher who has a history of just totally having all these anomalies going on and all these different injuries going on. So let's take a short-term approach with Scherzer and Verlander and give them the money in a shorter period of time as opposed to paying Jacob DeGrom and going through this over and over and over and over and over again with him. So they seem to have gotten that one right, at least at the moment. And I would just say that It's Francisco Lindor, it's Daniel Vogelback, it's Starling Marte. It's these guys that just have not come through. And, you kind of had a couple games here and there. Nimmo seems to be, a consistent player, plays well, gets on base. And if you're Thomas Nido, you can't complain. I mean, you have a 278 OPS. I mean,
goodbye.
You could be the greatest defensive catcher in the history of the league. They're not going to keep you, especially after Alvarez is doing what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could probably, if you're Tomas Nido, I agree. I'm just playing devil's advocate for a second. If you're Tomas Nido, you're probably thinking, why can't you carry 3 catchers? Use me because the pitching staff loves me, and get rid of Vogelback because this guy's a total bum, and have one of the young guys be the DH all the time and figure it out that way. I mean, that's probably what I'd be thinking if I were him. But the Mets are thinking, all right, carrying 3 catchers doesn't make sense, and we're going to give Vogelback another shot, and it will upgrade that, and we'll change that as the season goes on. But I think I'd be a little upset if I were Tomas Nido, but it's not like he's, as you say, he's not Johnny Bench, he's not Carlton Fisk.
They signed Narvaez, and we all wanted Alvarez here. I think Nido was a luxury only if Alvarez was overwhelmed. Yeah. And he's not been overwhelmed. He's been fine, and he's a rookie. Like Anthony Volpe, he's a rookie. It's going to take them, it's going to take him a year or two to figure it out and to really get totally comfortable. But they're hitting home runs. They're not maybe hitting for great averages, but to me, when I listen to the pitchers talk about Alvarez, I'm like, they're happy with him.
Oh yeah, well and I think that they probably were thinking when Narvaez came back up that maybe Alvarez he would go back down, but he played himself onto this team, and he's here to stay now, and that's the end of it.
He deserves to be the everyday starter.
Exactly, and there's no question about it. He has earned that, and I think that that's the best route for them. And really, this is what the fan base wants. I mean, you want your team, and this is what Steve Cohen talked about being Dodgers East. There's 2 ends of that. One is you're in on every free agent. You can retain your own. There's not going to be a monetary blockage for anything. And also, it's the developing of guys and bringing those guys up to be everyday players. That is what the sustainability of winning is in Major League Baseball. And this is why the Yankees have fallen short in recent memories. A lot of these young guys that Brian Cashman was counting on to be everyday players have not worked out for them. And that's what the Mets need to be sustained. Beatty, Vientos, Alvarez, all these guys have to work out. They do. And I'm really, really happy that we've seen all of them to this point.
I'll tell you what about, Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo? They've worked out.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely they have. Yeah.
But the pitching problems, that's a whole nother set of circumstances. You thought you had pitchers, and then all of a sudden, you get thoracic outlet syndrome, and then you have elbows and necks and backs and all sorts of crap. I mean, what happened with the Mets, and they should have had something akin to the Atlanta Braves pitching staff that just could never, ever stay on the field.
Yeah, I mean, and there was multiple versions of that, all the way back to Generation K, when you had Pulsifer, Wilson, and Isringhausen, and those guys coming up and thinking that they were going to be Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz 2.0, and of course that never worked out. And then you get Harvey and Syndergaard. It's Jacob deGrom as well. Jacob deGrom was awesome. Probably, the second best pitcher in Mets history. Well, arguably Doc Gooden, number 2. Obviously, Seaver 1, Gooden, and deGrom there. But look at the way his career ended. We don't even care about him anymore. And now we're just sitting there, at least I am, looking at him getting hurt in Texas and going, all right, good. Get out of here. Glad you're not here. Glad you didn't spend the money on him. I mean, it just shows you the history of bringing up pitchers with the Mets and them not panning out. I mean, they really have, throughout the organization, homegrown guys, both either with pitching or everyday players, have never really worked out the exact way you've wanted them to in the last number of decades.
Well, you got to go back to Seaver, Kuzman, Matlack, Gentry, and Nolan Ryan.
Basically,
Think about that. Think about that for a second.
I mean, yeah.
Think about the Mets had Nolan Ryan and got rid of him. The Mets had
Jim
Tom
Fregosi,
Seaver.
by the way.
Yeah, Jim Fregosi. The Mets had Tom Seaver. They got rid of him.
Yeah, that's true. But they also had Jacob deGrom and got rid of him, and now he's...
But it's a different story.
Yeah, right.
Now.
Yeah,
Back
I know.
then, those guys were men. They actually pitched.
Yeah, they did, and Jacob deGrom has not. And I really thought he was actually going to pitch through stuff this year, and he wasn't going to ask out of games and all that stuff. But no, I mean, he's once again legitimately hurt.
Well, whatever it is legit, and it's not our problem anymore. It's basically Texas's problem, and let them worry about it. But again, I did not lose sleep last night.
I did.
Because the Mets are in Atlanta. I'd like to see the Mets take 2 out of 3. I'd like to see the pitchers do what they were brought here to do, and I'd like to start seeing some, offensive pop and key hitting by Francisco Lindor, especially with runners in scoring position. I like the fact that the young guys are up here. I'd like to see more of Vientos. I mean, I know he doesn't have great numbers, and just because somebody's raking it down at AAA, by the way, doesn't mean that the moment they come up to the major leagues, they can handle it.
Oh, sure.
And we're seeing that at times. Sometimes, Beatty, for instance, sometimes he'll work out a walk after getting down, say 1 and 2, and then next thing you know, he's, they're trying to pitch him out of the zone and they're trying to get him to fish. And sometimes he will not do that. And you could see that he gets what they're trying to do to him. But then there'll be other times where he will swing over a pitch and miss it by 2 feet. The ball will end up down by his toes.
Yeah.
And he'll strike out. But that's part of being a rookie, part of learning Major League Baseball, part of learning the pitchers and learning what they're doing to you. And you figuring out, along with your hitting coach, the analytics geeks and everything else, what you're swinging at, what you're not hitting, what you should be looking for, and understanding that, Major League Baseball is a completely different set of circumstances, than AAA ball. I'm just sorry. And I don't care what somebody's doing in AAA. You could sit here and you can argue with me all day long, and I don't want to get into an argument, but
I'm not going to argue about AAA baseball.
Once you get up into the big leagues, and I don't care at what level it is, I don't care if it's the NFL, I don't care if it's the NHL, I don't care if it's the NBA, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer even, man, it goes from a different level. It goes like to warp speed, and it happens fast. And if you're not ready for it, we'll be able to tell. I would just say, in regard to Vientos, everybody was excited when he came up here.
Yeah.
And you see his numbers, you see his production. It is down. It is not what it was at AAA. Is that because he's not playing enough?
Maybe.
They should let him play through it, no matter whether it's a right-handed or a left-handed pitcher? Or should they send him back down and get him more at-bats down there so he starts feeling comfortable again in the batter's box?
Well, I'll give you a perfect example.
That's always the rub with these guys.
Yeah, of course. I'll give you a perfect example. Last year, the Mets were in dire need of offense with that Braves series down in Atlanta in September because Starling Marte was hurt and Francisco Alvarez got called up. He was thrown in there to be the DH, and he was totally overwhelmed. Absolutely overwhelmed in that series because he went from being a AAA superstar, hitting bombs and going viral on social media every single night to being thrown smack dab in the middle of a pennant race between 2 of the best teams in the game. And he wasn't ready for that.
He was only brought up because of an injury, though. That's the thing. I mean, it wasn't.
But they needed offense. They didn't call him up and sit him on the bench. They called him up and threw him in the lineup and said, "We need you to hit."
And he wasn't ready.
Nope, he was not. But it didn't ruin him.
No, it didn't. You could tell by watching him. He knows what he's doing behind the plate. He knows how to hit. We always have to remember that he is a catcher. Mm-hmm. He's not a shortstop or a left fielder or center fielder where you're expecting, I don't know, what would you expect from him? 25 and 90?
Be great.
I think you could expect that from him eventually.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll get that from him this year, but I do think that he's a keeper and he's a guy that should be here. And they're not going to carry 3 catchers. We know that.
And by the way, Gary Sanchez hits another home run for the Padres last night. He's had 3 home runs in 21 at-bats since joining the San Diego Padres. It wasn't going to happen here for him, but it's amazing. Watching the highlights this morning, it's like, what a resurgence from reborn Gary Sanchez in a Padres uniform.
Interesting that there were a lot of people that shot down that signing for the short period of time that they brought him here because of the injuries. The dry
I didn't want it.
Well, I mean, they had to do something. They needed a backup catcher.
Yeah.
So why not go get somebody that has some sort of experience, whether you like it or you don't? They only brought him here for a week, and it wasn't until Navarez was going to be healthy, and then they were going to DFA Nito. We all knew what the hell was going on here. And at least they gave him a shot, and other teams saw him, and the Padres had a need.
That's right. Well,
Padres are going through a ton of injuries. You talk about a team that's got a payroll.
Yep.
And guys at big names that are either hurt or out of the lineup now. All of a sudden, it's the same thing. The Padres and the Mets are like mirror images of each other.
Yeah, but the Mets have been healthy for the most part.
True.
And they just had a lot of underperforming.
Thanks so much for watching the video.
Please like and subscribe.
And don't forget to hit the bell so you're notified when we're dropping new content.